bending over to pick things up. One way is a squat. A lot of you cannot do a squat because a lot of people tell me I can't do that because of my knees. So at least you can do a partial squat. Here's a way of picking up something. Pens on the floor. If any of us go down, we're just going to go down and pick it up. So once again, the problem with that is I have just bent over, and I bent over at the waist, and that's doing most of the activity, is bending at that hinge. Sure, you might not have pain when you do that, but when you do that 600,000 times, that wears down on the lower back, and then all of a sudden you bend over to pick up that pen one more time. Oh! And now your back is frozen, and then you call me, and my back is blown out, and I'll ask you what happened, and you say, I bent over to pick up a pen. So we know it wasn't the pen that did that. We know it was the 600,000 times prior to that that did you in, right? So what you can do is a couple of things. One is a squat, right? Just go into a squat position. Now this is going to be more apt for you to do this with heavier loads. So you're bending over to pick something up, and you're going to do that by getting into a squat position. It takes an extra half a second to remember, don't bend over at the waist to pick that up. Bend over, spread the feet apart, go down into a squat, pick up whatever you're doing. Okay? So squat instead of bending at the waist. Now the second one I just alluded to a moment ago is the hip hinge. So some of you might not want to get into a squat because your knees are bothering you. So getting down like this bothers your knees. Let's do the hip hinge. Let's take a look at that. Here's just bending over. All the force is going into the waist, right? Here's what a hip hinge looks like. Getting down, putting the rear end as far out as you can. Notice my spine gets parallel with the floor when I do this, but I can pick this up here, and that's way less stress on the lower back. A lot of the force is the rear end being stuck out to the backside like this, and then I can come up driving through the heels. And then my glutes do all the work. Now, part of this was prompted from a very interesting article that I just came across. My brother sent it to me from NPR. The title of it was Lost Art of Bending Over, How Other Cultures Spare Their Spines. And this is from Michaeline Ducliffe, NPR, February 26th of 2018. To see if you're bending correctly, try a simple experiment. Stand and put your hands on your waist, says Jean Couch, who has been helping people get out of back pain for 25 years in her California studio. Now imagine she dropped a feather, I dropped a pen, and what are you going to do to pick it up? Immediately we tend to look down, right? So I'm going to move that over. We tend to look down, and then we bend ourselves into that C curve to go after it, right? And that's what they're getting in here. We look like folded cashews, she says in this article, which is very interesting. The author, Michaeline Ducliffe, said, I first noticed this mysterious bending style of the bending over, the lost art of bending over, bending from that hip hinge. She first noticed this when she was covering the Ebola outbreak in Liberia. And they would see women that were bent over like this, gardening. And they were bent over, as you can see, bent over at the hips. Spine is parallel to the ground so they could get low to do their things. And she started noticing this around the world when she was looking for photos around the world. An older woman planting rice in Madagascar, a Mayan woman bending over at a market in Guatemala, and women farming grass in northern India. This bending seemed to be very commonplace around the world, but not here in our culture. So what they're talking about is the hip hinge, okay? So when you do that, you're sticking out the rear end as far as you can as the spine goes lower and lower and lower like this to pick up a load or do some work. And then I'm just adding that as you come back up, you push through the heels to make sure that your rear end muscles are doing it. Now, one way or the other, we're going to get our spine parallel with the ground. Here's the way that you're bending forward just using your spine, just using your lower back. Or if you watch that again, use the hip hinge when you're coming back like this and coming back over. So even if your knees have trouble bending into that particular position in a squat, you're going to be able to do the hip hinge by pushing those hips out, getting yourself flat, taking a lot of stress and pressure off the lower back, and then coming back up again by driving through the heels. Again, it takes that extra half a second to get used to bending over like that. That's going to save you a lot of back pain and a lot of time in my office. I'm Dr. Scott Fuller. Please join me again.